Each year, athletes from across the globe converge on Haines City, Florida, test the limits of their bodies and the resilience of their spirits at Ironman Florida 70.3. This documentary invites you behind the scenes of an athlete's return to triathlon after a forced 4-year hiatus, a story of grit, ambition, and unwavering dedication. From early morning swims to relentless training rides beneath the hot and humid summer sun and pounding footfalls on winding roads, we will witness the evolution of a competitor with a humble and grateful heart striving for redemption. But this is more than a race. It is a voyage through adversity and triumph. Through moments of doubt and bursts of inspiration, there will be setbacks and surprises, victories large and small, and the discovery of the true meaning of perseverance. Join us as we chronicle the milestones and missteps, the sweat and celebration culminating in one unforgettable day. This will not only be a tale of athletic determination, but a portrait of the human spirit, undaunted, unbreakable, and ever reaching for the extraordinary. Welcome to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. Welcome, everyone, to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. This is the documentary on my prep for Ironman 70.3 in December. So this is the conclusion of week 6 of the training plan. So it's a 16-week plan. This week was a rollback week. And so I'm going to talk a little bit on the purpose of a rollback week when I get into the insights section of this video. So I want to save that, but let's just talk. I had training plan of 14 hours and 40 minutes. When it was all said and done and what was executed, I had executed a plan of 14 hours and 49 minutes. So pretty much right on pace with where I should be, or where the plan says I should be. It's just about 9 minutes long, but that's okay. So the week saw a reduction in volume of 20%. So the training volume is down 20%. So if I look at the 3 primary phases of the plan, my cycling volume was down 26%, my run volume was down 23%, and my swim volume measured in distance, the other 2 are measured in duration. The swim measured in distance and yards was down 22%. But my strength remained constant in terms of the duration planned, but my execution of the strength plan was a deload week in the weight room. So when I get to that section, I'll talk a little bit about how I executed that. But overall, it was a week that was well executed, a little less stress in terms of, my personal life and work. I did have my son this week, so that was, that stress was there, but that's okay. But I executed the plan and I had a good week. So let's dive right into the different segments. So let's start with the run. This was a solid week of running. So I executed the 6-minute interval. So I did 6x2s this week. 3 of my runs were progressive runs. And so what I did was, for each of those 6-minute intervals, each successive interval was faster than the previous interval. I'm going to make some changes this week on that structure. And so I'm kind of looking forward to giving some more structure to the run workouts, rather than just, because in the training plan it just says open, and I just kind of go by how I'm feeling that day. And, I say, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, so let's try a progressive run today. So next week's runs are going to be a little bit more structured. I have a bit more of a solid plan on how I'm going to execute those progressions, but I am going to attempt some more progressive runs. This is really good practice. As a coach, and when I put together plans, I really like the progressive run approach. It teaches a little bit of discipline and patience in a run, to where you're starting off at a relaxed effort and you're allowing the run to build as it progresses. I believe that this is a really good approach for run training. Whether you can execute a progressive run during a race, that's a little bit more challenging. If you're talking about a shorter race, maybe like 5K, 10Ks, those are those are reasonable goals to have, would be a progressive run. If you're looking for a stretch goal, maybe do a progressive run. A mid-level goal may be a negative split, where the second half of a run is faster than the first half. So that's what a negative split is. Progressive runs means that each mile that you run gets successively faster as the run progresses. So what I'd like to do in training is I like to try and practice that. If it happens in a race, then that's fantastic. I would say that is a sign of a fantastic race, well executed plan. Now, whether that, like I said, whether that happens on race day is yet to be seen, but I like to at least practice it in training. Most of my runs this week were done on a treadmill, mostly because of scheduling and just trying to manage the volume. Earlier in the plan, I had run workouts and bike workouts kind of like in the same block. They weren't brick sessions per se, but I have 5 runs in the plan and I have 5 bikes in the plan. So obviously there's going to be days where I have to bike and run on the same day. Earlier in the plan, those workouts were shorter. So we're talking like a 30-minute run and a 35-minute bike. Let's just use that example. That's easy to execute within a single training session. The way that I've been doing is I would run first and then I would bike second. Typically, the standard brick session for a triathlete is that you would bike first and then run second. So there's a particular reason on why you have that structure. But I'm not at the point in the plan yet where that's a reasonable approach to take. That's something that I would typically put in during like a peak phase of a training plan. And so what I've done now is, because there are instances where now I have to go into the office a lot more than I was before, I'm splitting up those sessions. So it's common on those days where I have a strength session, a run session, and a bike session all in the same day. And that's typically, I think it's like a Monday and Wednesday is that structure. So I'll pick one of those 3 to do in the morning, a second one to do kind of like around lunchtime, and then a third one to do in the evening. And so there's 3 distinct training sessions or 3 efforts throughout the day. It's challenging to try and get those in, but mentally draining is kind of what I would say more so than physically draining. It's just trying to muster the motivation to do another training session rather than just calling it a day. It is challenging, but now we're getting into the part of the plan where it's a little bit more difficult to execute that kind of volume within a single session and then be able to do things, like get to work on time or have other tasks that you need to get done. So I'm going to stick with this approach where I'm doing a morning session, an afternoon session, and then an evening session. It seems to be working. I executed that this week, and I believe I did that the previous week as well, when my career, my professional life kind of changed a little bit, and the responsibilities that were needed kind of altered my schedule. So I had to be a little bit more flexible. So like I said, my running this week was pretty solid. It was a rollback, so it was a reduction in volume, but I felt in control. I had previously attempted this 6-minute interval. I think it was like in week 2 of the plan, and I don't feel like it went very well. I don't think I was ready either mentally or physically for a 6-minute interval. So it was week 3 because I did a 4-minute, a 5-minute, and then progressed to the 6, and then I went back to the 5 because I liked the 5 more. The 4 was just was too short. And by the time I kind of got into the flow of it, I was forced to walk again for the walk portion of the interval. And so I didn't like it. 5 minutes, I felt really in control and liked it. I was able to push the pace and push the effort because the duration was kind of short. And so I thought I would try the 6-minute again during this rollback week, and 6-minute worked. I feel like it was a pretty solid effort. I was still able to progress nicely throughout the intervals. And so I'm going to stick with the 6 again this week, see how this week goes. And if it's a success, then I'll test out a 7-minute interval rather than kind of like tweaking the rest side of it. I'm really kind of trying to get more bang for the buck by focusing on the run portion rather than minimizing the walk portion. So we're going to see how that goes. But this week I'm staying with the 6. And like I said, I'm giving more structure to it. So for the next one, is let's look at the bike. So I had a pretty solid week on the bike. This is, by far my favorite of the three. I love being on the bike. On Monday, I had what I call a ramp up ride. And these are 4 by 5 minute intervals. And I did 2 rounds of those. So it goes, zone 2, 3, 4, 5, and then resets back down to 2, and then progresses again 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's the same kind of nature as a progressive run, but it's on the bike side of it where I build power. So I allow that effort to build throughout the ride. Again, I think that this is really good practice for a race. It's going to teach you to, if you're coming at this from a triathlete perspective, rather than just a single sport like cycle effort only, I would say I like this approach for a triathlete because you're coming in off of the water, you're coming into transition, and that transition from the swim to the bike, getting on the bike is one of the most chaotic parts of the race. People aren't paying attention, their heads are down, they're trying to clip into their pedals, and there's a bunch of stuff that's going on, messing around with watches and so forth. So it can be chaotic and distracting. So not pushing the effort right off the bat allows you to kind of like settle in, keep your wits about you, stay calm, collected, and aware and present in the moment, rather than trying to immediately go into like some kind of like higher effort, trying to hit your goal power, your goal cadence, or goal heart rate, or whatever it is that you're using as your your race metric that you're trying to hit and execute your strategy. So I like this approach of letting the ride build naturally. And as you get deeper and deeper, it just kind of like just takes off. I do this I try to do this on some of my open rides when I'm outside riding out on the road. And so I was able to execute that this week in my long ride, where the second half of my ride was significantly was better than the first half of the ride, both in terms of power and speed and cadence. All of my metrics were better, and better in terms of, higher cadence, higher power, both in average and normalized power, and higher speed in the second half of the ride than in the first half. So I negative split my long ride this week. Whether I can do that on race day, I don't know. But, this is where we kind of practice those things in training. And if it happens on race day, then that's fantastic. Like I said, the ramp up workout that I did was a little bit more challenging than I expected. So these were, I want to say that they were 2-minute segments. And so, it was 2 minutes at a zone 5 effort. For me, is a challenging effort to try and maintain that focus and that output and the muscular endurance for those 2 minutes. We're not going to be using zone 5 efforts during the race, but it's nice to go to that point where you're above your race effort in some situations during training. You don't want to constantly train at a level that is either at your race effort or below. You do want to kind of dip into that, that higher effort that you plan to execute for race day, whether that's running or cycling or swimming, whatever your sport is. So that was kind of the approach this week. Like I said, it was a little bit more challenging, but it worked. I liked it. And so I'll probably actually attempt that workout again and see how that goes. So my big gear session, I had a big gear bike session this week. As always, typically I like these big gear sessions, but these were really short big gear intervals. And I think these were the 2-minute intervals. And so what it allowed me to do is really up the power in those efforts. What I had actually done is I had mistakenly programmed the workout to where normally for the big gear sessions, I'll go for a target of zone 4 in terms of my power. And my cadence is anywhere between 50 to 55 RPM is kind of like my goal. When I programmed the workout, I must have, mistakenly used kind of like mid zone 3 to like mid zone 4. So it was kind of shifted a little bit. And when the interval came up and I saw the power target, I was like, that isn't right. I'm way above it. And so I just went with it and I just said, well, let's just see what I can do. And so when I went back and I executed that, and when I went back to look at the workout, my big gear efforts were actually in zone 5. And so I was pretty stoked that I was able to push that kind of effort for 2 minutes with a big gear effort. And so, I just happened to stumble now onto a new workout that I've actually now adjusted this workout and put it in the plan for 2 weeks from now, because next week is already set. And so I put it into the following week, and I was like, I'm going to try this again. But I made sure to go in and correctly program the workout to where it's going to ask me for a zone 5 effort, so I can kind of see. Sometimes when you're training with technology like this, the technology can either hinder you or it can help you. Sometimes when it's giving you this goal that that it wants you to be in, whether that be some kind of like range, I never do point estimates. So it's not like I'm saying I want to ride at 200 watts. It's always kind of like I want to ride anywhere between, like 190 to 220. And try and stay within that range, whether I'm at the upper end of the range, if I'm feeling good. If I'm not feeling all that great, then I try and stay in the lower end of the range because I'm still within the prescribed target range. And sometimes I'm just trying to aim just for the middle of the ground, middle of the range. Sometimes if you have these ranges, you're trying to stay within the range, but you're really kind of like holding back and you never really kind of see the potential. Some days you have really, really good days that you can go higher, but you hold back a little bit so that you execute the plan. Now, I'm not saying that this is the approach that you should use all the time, because there is a way to manage intensity, and going red line all the time is not a good way to manage that intensity. But there are times where you can push the effort, because I knew what I had coming up the next day, the day before, what I did the previous day. And this effort allowed me to say, you know what, let's just go for it and see what I've got in the tank. And so I'm going to try it again and see if I can hit that kind of effort. Last week, if you watched the video from last week, you heard about the story from my long ride. It was quite the experience, but no shenanigans this week. I was able to execute the ride well. Like I said, it was a kind of a negative split. My ride this week, because it was rollback, was 2 hours and 50 minutes. And I was actually able to hit 52.5 miles. So I was happy with that because I don't want to talk about like what my race goals are because it's too early in the plan, but I do have some kind of like expectations that I think that I can do. And I was, charting out those numbers, and that's how I used that to kind of build the plan, because I was like, well, this is what I think, this is what I would like to be able to execute in the race. This is what I think I can reasonably do based on my past performances this year. And so this is what I think I can hit. And then I built the plan using that and say, okay, well, I want to go, my long ride can be 45% more than what I'm planning, what I would like to do on race day. That's how I built my plan. And so I was able to get pretty close to the race distance that I'm going to have to cover, which is 56 miles in Florida. So I was able to hit 52.5 below the time that I'm kind of looking for. So it put me more in line with where I would like to be on race day. So that was a big boost of confidence that I think that my expectations that I had or my desires that I had when I built the plan are reasonable, and I'm in the ballpark. I'm not asking myself in week 6 to, grab a drink. I'm not asking myself to hit my race performance now in week 6 of a 16-week plan. That's unreasonable, and it's not responsible either as an athlete and a coach to ask that of, someone. But it is nice to kind of see a little bit of glimpse into fitness that you have. Rollback weeks are a great opportunity to allow you to kind of get a little bit of an insight, a little bit of glimpse on where your fitness is at. And I'll talk about why that's the case later on in the video. The long ride was a big boost of confidence that I'm kind of like in the ballpark and I'm on target. I did make a mistake in calculating my nutrition plan because I was going out for a significantly less amount of time than what I have been. Normally, I've been going out for like 3.5 to 3 hours and 45 minutes. I was only going out for 2 hours and 50 minutes. So rather than use the high carb mix, I just dropped back down to like their standard, like Scratch's standard hydration mix. I got one of their uh, protocol mixes. When I ordered my mix, I got like a little bonus pack, and they said this is a new flavor that we're going to be coming out with, and it was a free pack. So I was like, yeah, why not? And so it's a watermelon flavor, and I really liked it, actually. So I thought it was a pretty good mix. And so I decided to use that rather than the high carb mix. I just didn't feel like high carb was needed for a 2 hour and 50-minute effort. That's kind of like in the mid 70-degree range, low humidity. It just didn't seem reasonable. But when I started mapping it out, I forgot to change a couple cells in my Excel file to create my estimate on what my carbs per hour would be if I ate and drank everything that I was going to plan on taking in the time that I expect to be out there. I'm trying to hit somewhere between 60 and 70 grams of carbs per hour. But I made the mistake and didn't change a couple of the cells. And so I thought I was going out with 68 grams per hour. What it ended up being was half of that, actually. So I only took in about 38 grams of carbs per hour. And my replacement rate, which is the way that I measure the replacement rate, is I look at the total calories consumed relative to total estimated calories expended. And that's the way that I look at that. I call it the replacement rate, was about, 30 some percent. Normally, I would like for that to be somewhere upwards of like 45 to 50% of my calories replaced based on the estimated caloric expenditure. Because triathlon and all endurance sports is an energy management effort. So that's what you're trying to manage the effort and stay up on your nutrition. You cannot possibly consume everything that you're burning, but you don't want to dig such a deep hole to where you have to consume so much to replace it. And if you're not consuming enough, then it's going to dip into more glycogen stores. And that's not what I want for training. I don't want to dig that kind of hole. So I like for that replacement rate to be around 45 to 50%. I've never gotten it up to 50%. That's really hard for me to consume that much. But 40 to 45 is reasonable. So I was more like in the low 30s. So that was a bit of a failure on my part this week when it came to the nutrition on my long ride. Today I had my gravel ride and another fantastic day out on the trails after last week being kind of like a rainy weekend, and I wasn't able to get out on the gravel bike. This week I rode hard, I rode fast, and I felt great. My bike handling skills were there, and I just kind of like blew through the trails, and I had a lot of fun out there. So it was a great way to start a Sunday morning. And so anytime I get a chance to be on the gravel bike, I'm definitely going to take it. So that concludes the bike training for the week. So let's see. The last one is a swim. I had a solid week in the pool, actually. So on the previous episodes, I've talked about the dreaded Tuesday swim that I've been having, and the way that I've structured that swim up until now. They were short intervals. They used to have some short efforts in them, so I called them an effort swim because I was working on speed work in the pool. But then when my shoulders started to kind of act up a little bit and I started getting some flare from my elbows, I was like, you know what, trying to work on speed is just not worth it right now in terms of what it's doing to me and my body's ability to absorb that and manage the impact. So I removed the effort, but kept the short 100 length intervals. So there were a bunch of hundreds that I was switching between paddles and pull buoys and straight swims. And so there was a lot of changing and logistics that was involved with that swim. And it just made it go so much longer than what it should have. Plus it was on Tuesday evening, right after a long day of training and working. And I hated that swim so much. And so now this week I tested out a new format where I'm asking to swim longer durations. This week I went to 250s rather than using the 100, and it went much better. A lot less, switching things out. I would do a group of 250s of just straight swimming. Then I would do do some 250s of just pull buoy work, and then some 250s of swimming with a pull buoy and paddles. And so I like that approach to where, it's like I'm swimming first because that's where I'm freshest. And so I can get that good body position and swim with the good form. Then once I start to fatigue a little bit, I was like, okay, well now let's kind of take away the whole concern over body position, and I throw on the pull buoy and it lifts the hips up, and I can just work on just upper body strength, just working on that stroke, getting that early vertical forearm, getting a nice pull through the water. And then at the end, where I'm probably the tiredest, is when I start to pull in the paddles. I love swimming with paddles. I feel like for my body, I get way better back engagement and better engagement of my lats and my traps when I'm swimming with paddles. And so it actually feels easier to swim rather than starting to feel harder, because you're engaging more muscles and you're increasing resistance in the water. And so naturally you would think, well, wouldn't it feel harder because, you're increasing resistance? But for me, I really handle it well, and I really love swimming with it. And so that's why I always save them for last. And so that new Tuesday structure, I like the 250s. So I'm going to go with the 250s on the Tuesday swim, and then the 300s on the Friday swim. And then my Sunday, my endurance efforts, I'm going back up to like the regular, length. I think I was up to 700s. So I think that next week I might be up to 800s now. And so, but my Tuesday swim, much better. Friday swim, really good. And so those two swims I did in the morning rather than in the evening time. And so I love swimming in the morning. If I have to choose between swimming in the morning and the evening, I'm definitely taking morning. By the evening time, I'm so tired and I'm kind of worn out from the day. And swimming is such a technical sport where, you're really kind of, any kind of like small little hitch in your stroke or bad body position can really kind of drag out that effort and make you less efficient. And it just really it makes the workout so much harder than what it has to be. If I do it in the morning when I'm fresher, I feel like I have way better body position in the water, better muscular endurance. And so I'm able to execute a better swim in the morning. So I'm going to try and stick with that as much as I can, swimming earlier rather than in the evening. So we'll see how that goes. Today, my elbows are feeling a little bit hot, so you can probably see in the video, I've got these little elbow sleeves on. What I've gotten into the habit this week is, when I finish my swims, I throw these elbow sleeves on to try and take the tension off of my elbows. For some reason, my biceps are they just feel tight all the time. And I think that tension is creating some inflammation in the elbow itself. And I'm off of my prescribed anti-inflammatories for now until I cycle back on this coming week. And so now I'm starting to feel kind of like everything that's going on. My elbows are a little bit on the hotter side. My shoulder is feeling a little bit hot, but this is just part of the game. These are the cards that I've been dealt. And so this is kind of, this is what I have to do if I want to participate. And I feel like I'm being responsible in terms of managing that under the direction of my doctor. And so if he comes back and says, we really need to get you off of these, I haven't had any symptoms where it's telling me that I need to be off of them. And so I'm going to continue because it allows me to build strength, to build fitness, and hopefully over time, these won't be such of an issue. So these elbow sleeves seem to be working pretty well. Sometimes I sleep in them as well to try and take the tension off while I'm sleeping, and it makes my morning feel a little bit better. And so that's how that went. So the last one is the strength for the week. The way that I approach this, rather than changing the duration of my strength sessions, I changed the weight. And so that's how I reduced volume. So I call it a deload week, where I'm kind of like deloading the muscle from tension. So what I would do is all of my movements are four sets. Some of my supersets are only 3 sets, but most of my efforts are 4 sets. I take the weight that I would lift in that 4th set and I reduced it by 25%, or I think it was 20%, 20 to 25%, right around there somewhere. And I would round up or round down depending on where that calculation would fall. And then I would adjust all the 3 previous sets by, reducing by whatever intervals, so if it's a dumbbell kind of effort, then I would just reduce it by 5, 5, and 5, because that's the increments of the dumbbells. So that's how I approach the deload. Effectively, I would reduce my weight by 20%. Most of my efforts are either 15 to 20 reps or 8 to 10 reps. The 8 to 10 reps are used if it's a superset. A superset is when you have two or more movements within the single session, and they're done quickly. So for instance, you could do a leg press superset where we do 10 reps on the left leg, 10 reps on the right leg, and then you do 10 reps of both legs. So that's the superset. And so what I would do is for those supersets is 8 to 10. So I maxed out the reps for all of the movements. So if it was a range of 15 to 20, I went for 20. If it was a range of 8 to 10, I went for 10. My argument for doing that is I've reduced weight, and so now I should be able to have the opportunity to really max out the reps and keep the muscles under tension for those extra reps. I found that in that last set, I could feel the burn. I wasn't struggling to push the weight, so I know that I was still accomplishing what my goal was, and that's to kind of like deload the muscles. But I could feel the burn, I could feel the muscles engaged, and I could feel the fatigue setting in, but it was manageable. And so when I started to feel the burn, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I feel like I executed this well. And so now next week, I jump right back into my normal approach. The weight goes up. The reps still kind of stick around that 8 reps or 15 reps. And then when I test for increases, I attempt the 20. So I have to go back and look on where I'm supposed to be this week in terms of, I don't think I'm going to ask myself to do any testing this week because I'm coming off of a deload week. I kind of want to have like a nice solid week in the weight room before I test again for some of the movements. But that's the approach, and I'm kind of excited. So the extras that come just from the insights this week, I was finally able to get in and get a massage. Normally, I get a massage every 2 weeks, and it allows me to manage some of the muscular issues that I have and just kind of like keep everything nice and flexible and elastic and just, malleable. So it was supposed to be the week before. So I actually went 3 weeks with no massage. My masseuse went out of town on vacation, and so we had to shift my appointment out a week. And so this time it was needed. It felt good. There were some problem areas that we're still working on. And so I was really happy to get in and get a massage. What I had done is I had already booked like several massage appointments out into the future. So this coming week, I actually have another appointment. So I get the opportunity to have a massage this past week and another one next week. I feel like the one next week is still going to be needed rather than pushing it out another week because I'm off of the anti-inflammatories. And so I feel like going in to see her is going to really kind of relieve some of the tension that I'm feeling, both in my feet and my elbows and in my neck, because I think that I have some tight neck muscles, which is contributing to pain in my shoulders. And so when she gets in, she usually like works pretty good on the neck muscles and in the upper trap area. And then she'll work a lot on the calves and the feet themselves. And then she'll work the biceps and forearms from my elbows. So I'm looking forward to another massage this week. Part of me is excited to move back to a normal, what I will call quote unquote normal training volume after a rollback week. But I think a lot of that is just driven by ego. It's after training for, up to like 18 and a half hours and you roll back to 14, part of me is just like, no, I want to keep going. It's that A-type personality very much. And so, I kind of struggle on rollback weeks, but I know it's all ego. And I know it's necessary, and I know it's a responsible and conservative approach to take because I'm not a believer in scheduled rest days, like pre-scheduled rest days. I'm more of a believer when it comes to rest days, like when the body is asking for a rest day, then you give it. But building one into the training plan just because it's a certain day, I'm not a big fan of that. So I do it for my athletes if they ask for it. If they don't ask for it, then I treat them the same way that I treat myself. I'll give them kind of like a rollback week every, 4 or 5 weeks, and then we'll roll back the volume and then go right back into it. But if they don't ask for it, that's the way that we typically will approach the plan. But none of my athletes, all of them seem to say, hey, based on my schedule, I need a rest day here, I need a rest day here. Or, I have one athlete who likes to do date nights on Fridays. And so, that's a standing rest day that's in the plan. I'll be honest with you, it was hard for me to do that, but this is that athlete's plan. This is what they want to execute. This is what they like. And so I would much rather give them a plan that they can execute and something that they can enjoy rather than something that I feel like they should do. And so that's been a learning experience for me as a coach. And I have to remind myself that not everyone is like me. And, what I like isn't necessarily going to work for somebody else. So because I like to train consistently, I like to train 7 days a week, I don't like to take days off. And, I've come to the realization that not everybody is like that. And so I'm trying to be more flexible with my athletes. So that's why I typically will use rollback weeks for me. And so like I said, it's an ego thing on why I don't like the rollback week, because I feel like I want to keep progressing, and some part of me thinks that a rollback week is a regression rather than a progression. But reality is that the rollback week is a chance for the body to shed fatigue. And without that, with that rollback and the shedding of the fatigue, you allow the body to recover and adapt. And when you start to then lay more training volume, the body can absorb it. And that's when you actually start to see the gain in fitness. It's not that you just keep asking your body to train more and more and more, and you get fitter and fitter and fitter. It's that chance to shed the fatigue, see a little bit of insight into where your fitness is at, and then ramp back up again. And so I've been really kind of like racking my brain a little bit on how to really look at this and come to grips with this method. And I'll talk about this for a second. Part of me, though, even though I'm excited to return back to normal volume, because I think next week is like 19 plus hours. So it is a big training week that's coming up. So part of me is nervous about that kind of training load. I've been putting in like 18 hour. It's like an increase of an hour effectively from where I was at prior to the rollback week. But going from 14 hours to 19 hours is a big jump, just week over week. So part of me is a little bit nervous. Part of me kind of like gets into that mindset of where you start to feel like, okay, these 14 hours, this is an easily executable plan. The volume is manageable. I'm still feel like I'm being tested, but not overly testing. And I'm not like really like pushing myself. But, now I'm asking myself to go 19 hours. So I'm nervous on how that's going to go. I believe I can execute this plan, but part of me is apprehensive, and that's okay. That's completely natural. And it's a reasonable thing to feel. And so, if you're looking at, one of your training plans and you kind of see a training volume that's coming up and you're like, man, I don't know if I can do that. It doesn't mean that you have a bad plan. And, sometimes it just takes getting through that week to remind yourself that, yes, I can do hard things. A lot of times it's not our bodies that's holding us back. It's our minds that's holding us back and keeping us from progressing. So sometimes it takes a little bit more effort to convince the mind that you're able to do it, not necessarily the body, because I think the body pretty much can easily, I don't want to say easily, but you can go to hard places easier physically rather than mentally. And so this is going to be kind of like a little mental push for me this week rather than a physical one. Yes, there's a big ramp up in volume, so I'm asking myself to run more, cycle more, swim more. Swimming volume is going to kind of stay about the same. I'm right about, I think my long swim is like 3,300. And so I think I'm close to like 9K or something for the week, which I think is reasonable volume. So it's 3 swims during the week, and then the longer like 3K. So I think that's my volume. Don't quote me on it, but I think that's what I've got. So I think that's a reasonable thing to do. The running, though, has me a little bit on the apprehensive side, because I think that my moderate run breaks over that 60-minute mark. So I think I go to like an hour and 5 as my moderate runs, and there's 2 of those in the week, and then the shorter runs. So I am nervous over that next week's bike session. It's another increase in bike volume, and my long ride goes to 4 hours. And so, Saturday is a little bit nervous because I think I've got a 45-minute run and then a 4-hour ride. And but then again, I'm still using the intervals for my runs. I'm doing that before the bike. And so, but being on a bike for 4 hours is a long time to be on the bike. And so I'm a bit apprehensive, but I love the bike. And so I'm willing to do it. So we'll see how this week goes. I'm kind of, like I said, I'm excited, but it's kind of like a nervous excitement and an uncertain kind of excitement. But, I've convinced myself that I can do hard things, and I can do harder things than what I think that can do. So, all right. So that concludes the 4 primary things that I'm working on is the swim, bike, run, and strength. Now let's talk a little bit about insights for the week. And so when I was out on my ride today, I was really kind of like contemplating, it's like, okay, I need some kind of discernment or I don't want to say like an epiphany, but I need some way to think about rollback weeks to make them more palatable in my mind. And so when I find myself on my Sunday rides, I feel like I'm praying more during the ride. And so I'm kind of like, I'm just out there and I'm kind of like connected. And I use that time to, talk to God. And it's just like, show me something that I can understand on why I should have a rollback week. And this verse came to my mind, and it just came out just nowhere, basically. And so what I'll say is it's Psalm 23, so verses 2-3. It's probably a piece of scripture that a lot of people know automatically. So it says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake." And so there's a couple words that's in that scripture that really kind of like stood out to me. And it says, "He makes me lie down." And that's what I need. I need to be made to lie down. I need to be made to rest. And he leads me beside the still waters to kind of like calm my mind. And so it's very soothing. So to me, that scripture kind of explains to me the purpose of a rollback week. It is a physical break in training to shed fatigue, right? The purpose behind athletic training is to fatigue the body, stress the body. You don't want to overstress it, but you don't want to understress it either. It's a fine balance and it's kind of like, it's an art. If you're looking at a painter and you're mixing in colors, a little bit of too much of one color can throw the color off that you're trying to achieve. Same thing with training. Too much intensity, too little intensity, too long of a duration, too short of a duration. Any one of those 4 kind of scenarios leaves you holes in your training plan, and you're not optimizing your opportunities to maximize performance. So that's the first piece of a rollback week is the physical side of it, to shed the fatigue. The second side of it is a mental break. So for me, I've been asking of myself to train for around 18 hours a week. And so that is a lot. That is a high volume training plan with, all the additional other stresses that are in life. And so it's been hard. I'll be honest and open with you. It's been hard to execute this plan. It's been possible, but it has been challenging and has been hard. So this week, when it dropped down to 14 hours, it was kind of like a little mental reprieve. It kind of like unwound my mind a little bit, less stress. I was actually able to test out something now to where I have a little feature that's in my Microsoft Outlook, is this task list. And so what I did was, a couple days ago, I wrote down all the things that I needed to do, to finish off the week, for all of the business stuff, the podcast stuff, my coaching business stuff, all the stuff that's required to make this content. And so I spaced it out. If I can ask myself to do 2 things here, 2 things there, and 2 things here today, which is normally a really stressful day as I record this episode, because there's a lot of coaching stuff that I'm doing, a lot of content that I'm trying to create to go along with this. It's a really packed full day, also with training and church and all the other responsibilities that I have. But this task feature that I was able to do, I was actually able to relax today a little bit and kind of take my time and enjoy my day a little bit more. Yes, I still worked a lot. And so, I was still engaged, but I didn't feel overwhelmed and pressured and, forced to work faster in order to get everything done. I felt more in control of my time and my effort. So that's something that I'm going to work on next week. So after I finish recording this episode, actually, I'm going to sit down and come up with my task list for next week. Social media posts on this day, editing, podcast stuff on this day, and produce training plans for this number of athletes on this day, and then produce training plans for these athletes on this day, produce my training plan on this day, produce content for this series here, whether it's like, documenting the workouts and creating that image, the pictures and stuff like that, updating the website. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And I think that this structure or this approach is helpful. And so I'm going to try it again next week. And so I think that the rollback week was that example of the mental break that I kind of needed to kind of like reset myself and come back to baseline. And again, that kind of fits with the scripture where it says that he leads me beside still waters. So it's the calming of the mind. He makes me lie down in green pastures, which is the physical break and the rest, that the quote unquote rest. I'm still active, but it's still a pretty significant reduction in volume. So it is active rest. And so that's the physical side of it. So I think that this scripture really was needed for me to kind of see the idea and to explain the idea behind a rollback week. And so I'm learning, I'm a coach and I'm an athlete. I've been at this for a long time, but there's still stuff that I'm trying to learn and implement. And this concept of the rollback week is still something that I'm trying to come to grips with. And really what I'm asking myself is to let go of my ego and not be of the mindset where it's like my fitness is gained by constantly increasing the demands, whether that be duration or distance or whatever. I can't keep asking my body to keep going higher and higher and higher without a break or with any kind of like reset. The body doesn't work that way. Even though I want it to work that way and my ego wants it to work that way, it doesn't. And so this scripture helped me kind of visualize the concept and the principles behind this rollback week. Now you may be saying, well, Coach, you said that you don't believe in rest days, but even God rested on the seventh day. And, there's the idea of the Sabbath day. So that is something that I'm still working through. And that is a work in progress. And when I figure it out, I will let you know. But I'm still not there yet. But that's okay. So I think that comes to the conclusion for the week. Those are my insights. And we talked about all the different components of my week. Also said next week I got a big training volume week. So we're rolling into week 7 next week. So thank you so much for tuning in for this episode. Be sure that I actually started pushing out these episodes in the podcast. So if you search for the Endurance Athlete Journey podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast episodes, you will see these as bonus casts. And so I'm still trying to get caught up. So I've been pushing out actually a couple bonus casts a week until I become in sync with where I'm at and get caught up. And so then you'll see this episode on Tuesdays within the podcast. It's not going to replace our existing content, which normally comes out on Thursdays. And so if this is something that you've been enjoying, check out the podcast. There's a lot of similar conversations that go on. I'm with Coach Katie Kassan. She's a registered dietitian and with a specialty in sports nutrition and a run coach as well. And so, if you are a listener of the podcast and you're listening to it, then you know all about kind of like the stuff that we talk about. But if you happen to stumble across this video, but you haven't listened to the podcast, give it a listen to and see if it's something that kind of resonates with you. Look at some of our topics and conversations that we've had. We would greatly appreciate it. So if you have any questions that you would like for me to address in any of these videos that are coming up in the future, please leave a comment. You can either post a comment because I post these on the Tabula Rasa Racing YouTube channel, If you have questions that you would like for me to address, leave a comment. I do look at those comments, and let me know, and I will work those into whatever episode. And so, love to hear from anybody who finds this content valuable. If you have something that you would like to talk about, you're free to reach out to me. Just go to tabularasaracing.com. You can send me a message there. You'll find this content actually hosted on the website along with all the structured workouts for each week. There's a picture gallery that's dedicated to each week of the plan, and at the bottom of the page you'll find a PDF that you can download for each week, which is basically a PDF of the picture galleries that are in there. So you can download those all free of charge. All the videos that they're hosted on the website as well. So you can go to tabularasaracing.com. There's a page that says Florida 70.3 or Ironman Florida 70.3. You can click on that, and that's where all the content is for this prep. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we're rolling into week 7, and I'm excited. And I will see you all next week. And so have a good week, everyone, and talk to you next week. Bye-bye.